You're standing in a crowded subway car. Someone collapses near the doors. Nobody moves. Not even you. It feels like cruelty. It isn't. The real reason is far stranger, and it was built into you long before subway cars, or crowds, or strangers ever existed. In March of 1964, a young woman named Kitty Genovese was attacked outside her apartment building in Queens, New York. The story that spread afterward claimed dozens of neighbors heard her cries and did nothing at all. Later investigations found the original reporting exaggerated parts of what actually happened that night. But the question it left behind never went away. Why do ordinary, decent people, surrounded by other ordinary, decent people, sometimes freeze when someone needs help? Two psychologists set out to answer that question with data instead of outrage. Their names were John Darley and Bibb Latané. They didn't think people were cruel. They suspected something more mechanical was happening, something closer to a hidden equation running quietly in the background of the mind. In 1968, they built an experiment to test it directly. A college student sat alone in a small room, speaking through an intercom with other students for what they believed was a group discussion. Partway through, one voice on the intercom began choking and gasping, calling out that they were having a seizure, begging for someone to come. When a student believed they were the only person who could hear those cries, they almost always rushed to help. Quickly. Within seconds. Most of the time. But when a student believed several other people could hear the exact same cries, everything slowed down. They hesitated. They waited. Some sat there the entire time and never acted at all. Darley and Latané called this diffusion of responsibility. The more witnesses there are to an emergency, the less any single witness feels personally responsible for acting. Not because they care less, because somewhere inside them, the responsibility quietly splits between everyone present, and splits again and again, until it spreads so thin that almost nobody can feel its full weight pressing down on them. In a related experiment, the same two researchers asked participants to sit alone in a small waiting room and fill out a questionnaire. Partway through, smoke began drifting in through a vent, thick enough to make the air hazy and the far wall hard to see. Alone in the room, almost everyone got up within seconds to report it. But seated alongside two other people who had quietly been instructed to stay calm and keep writing, most participants did the exact same thing. They sat there, eyes watering, smoke thickening around them, and kept checking boxes on a form because the calm faces beside them felt like evidence that nothing was actually wrong. Here's the part that should make you pause. The students who froze weren't cold or indifferent. Many of them described feeling intense anxiety while sitting at that intercom, caught between two competing impulses. Act now, or wait to see what everyone else decides to do first. Their hesitation wasn't apathy. It was conflict. So why would your own body do that to you? Why would something as urgent as helping another human being come wrapped in built-in hesitation? To understand that, you have to leave the psychology lab and go back tens of thousands of years. For nearly all of human history, you didn't live in a city full of strangers. You lived in a small band of perhaps 30 to 50 people, almost everyone you'd ever known personally your entire world. In a group that size, the people around you weren't just company. They were your sensors. If something alarming happened nearby, your eyes didn't only look toward the danger itself. They flicked sideways too, scanning the faces of the people near you, reading their posture, searching for a signal about what was actually happening. This reflex is called social referencing, and it starts shockingly early. Long before you could speak in full sentences, your brain was already checking the adults around you to decide whether something new was safe or threatening. Show a toddler an unfamiliar object and watch what happens. Most won't react to the object first. They'll glance at a parent's face and decide how to feel based on what they see there. You did exactly this as a child. In subtle ways, you still do it now, every single day, without ever noticing. In the ancestral world, this made sense. Acting alone, without first reading the group, was often the more dangerous choice, not the braver one. A person who rushed toward a sound while everyone else stayed perfectly still might be running straight into something the group had already silently sensed and chosen to avoid. A predator just out of view, a rival group passing nearby, a threat felt before it was ever seen. Pausing long enough to read the group wasn't a flaw in the system. For a very long time, it was the system working exactly as it should. Now bring that same circuitry forward, into a subway platform, a busy sidewalk, a crowded hallway. The hardware hasn't changed. Only the scenery around it has. Your brain still glances sideways before it commits forward. It still asks, instantly, and without asking your permission first, what is everyone else doing right now? And if everyone around you looks calm, frozen, or simply unsure, that uncertainty becomes contagious almost instantly. You read their stillness as information, even when it isn't reliable information at all. Maybe it's not as serious as it looks. Maybe someone already called for help. Maybe you're misreading the whole situation. None of those thoughts have to be true for them to feel convincing in the moment. For decades, research has treated this as a fairly simple rule. More witnesses, less helping, almost every time. Then, in 2011, a researcher named Peter Fisher, working with several colleagues, went back through more than 50 years of bystander research and ran a large meta-analysis covering thousands of participants across dozens of separate studies. What they found complicated the simple version of the story and made it far more interesting. The bystander effect showed up most strongly in situations that were genuinely ambiguous, moments where it wasn't immediately clear whether something dangerous was even occurring. Someone doubled over on a sidewalk. A raised voice coming through a thin wall. A car stopped at an odd angle on the shoulder of a road. In moments like these, a larger crowd really did mean a slower, weaker response, exactly as the original experiment suggested. But when the danger was unmistakable, an obvious physical threat, a clear and undeniable emergency, the effect shrank dramatically. In some studies, it nearly disappeared entirely. In other words, your hesitation was never really about the number of people watching. It was about how much uncertainty filled the space around the event. A crowd doesn't paralyze you by making you careless. It paralyzes you by making you unsure of what you're even looking at, and an unsure mind tends to stall while it waits for one more piece of information before it commits to moving. Doesn't that change how you see every frozen crowd you've ever stood in? That single discovery reframes the entire story. You're not frozen at the intercom or on the subway platform because you don't care what's happening to the person in front of you. You're frozen because some very old part of your mind is still quietly running an ancient calculation. Read the group first, locate the actual danger, then move. In a small band of people who'd known each other for years, that calculation might take a single second. In a crowd of total strangers, where nobody's expression gives you a clear signal either, that same calculation can stretch on far longer than any real emergency can afford to wait. Once you understand the mechanism, you can also see exactly how to break it. Researchers who study emergency intervention have identified one detail that consistently shatters the freeze almost instantly: specificity. The moment a single person within a crowd is addressed directly, pointed at, described by their clothing, asked by name to call for help, the diffusion collapses. The responsibility stops splitting infinitely between anonymous strangers and lands completely on one identifiable person. The ancient circuitry that once needed a clear signal from the group finally gets one, loud and unambiguous, and it acts almost immediately. This is precisely why modern safety training now teaches people to point directly at one specific bystander during an emergency and assign them a single, concrete task, rather than shouting a general request for help into open air. A vague call lets the responsibility scatter in every direction at once. A direct, specific instruction interrupts the ancient hesitation loop before it ever has the chance to fully take hold. Think for a moment about how often you now live inside ambiguous crowds, not the kind made of physical bodies standing on a sidewalk, the kind made of light glowing in your hand. You scroll through a feed and see someone post something quietly desperate, a comment that reads more like a cry than a complaint ever could. You assume someone closer to them will reach out first. You watch a coworker visibly struggling through a difficult meeting, and you assume someone with more authority in the room will be the one to say something. You sit inside a group chat where somebody shares painful news, and you watch the typing indicator appear, then vanish, then appear again, from 3 different people in a row, and somehow nobody sends a single message at all. Have you ever been the third person watching that indicator blink, waiting for someone else to type first? Walk down a city block and pass someone slumped against a wall, and watch what you actually do. You glance at the strangers walking just ahead of you before you decide anything for yourself. If they keep walking without slowing, some part of you quietly reads that as a verdict already reached on your behalf. But if even one person stops, the spell breaks almost instantly, and others tend to follow within seconds. The signal was never about the person on the ground. It was about the first person willing to break formation. It's the exact same ancient circuitry, wearing a different costume. The same diffusion of responsibility, spread across likes and replies, and read receipts, instead of faces and posture. The same eyes flicking sideways, this time toward a screen, still quietly searching for permission to be the one who acts first. You're standing in a room filled with hundreds of people right now. They just happen to be living inside your phone instead of standing beside you on a platform. And somewhere in that room, someone is waiting for the exact same thing that broke the freeze in every experiment that ever measured it. Not a crowd, not a system. Just one person, willing to stop checking what everyone else is doing, and simply move first.